Okay, good to see you. Hope you've had a good week. And so far, anyways, we're going to study James. This middle page of my Bible just really wants to fly away. And just try to keep it in there, nice and neat. There you go. Some tape, yeah. All right, we are in the book of James, chapter number 3, yes?
Yes.
Yes. And I brought my book just in case we get to it. So if we get through chapter 3, we're going to start. We'll get into some of those questions. Hopefully you got those done. Hopefully at least one other person brought their book, and it'll be just me and you doing questions if that's what it takes. All right. James chapter 3. We read all the way through 12, and we didn't really. I think we talked a little bit about 9 and 10, right? And so we didn't really get into 11 and 12, which is what we're going to do. What we're going to do right now. So let's just start. Let's just read the whole passage again, 9 through 12. James 3 says, with it, when we're talking about the tongue, that's the it, just in case anybody's this first class here, and you don't know what James 3 is talking about. We're talking about the tongue, and he says, with it, we bless our God and Father, and with it we curse men who've been made in the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceed blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be so. Does a spring send forth fresh water and bitter from the same opening? Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olives, or a grapevine bear figs? Thus, no spring yields both salt water and fresh. Okay, so I imagine that a spring that yields, I've never found one of these. I'm sure obviously they exist. A spring that yields salt water, not very helpful. Or just nasty water, dirty water. So there are springs that, not every spring is this lush, beautiful, crisp, clear water that's coming forth from the ground, right? So there are such things as bad springs. Yes? Okay. Yeah, I think that's what he's saying here. And he uses this example to show that a spring is either one or the other. It can't naturally, by natural means, a spring can't give both at the same time, right? Is that right? Does that make sense? You can't. Your spring is not going to one minute be giving you good water you can drink, and then the other just spitting out nasty stuff, and then go back and forth. I don't think that's the thing. And so that's the point that he's making. So they had good springs, and then they had bad springs, but it was one or the other. Now remember, we're talking about the tongue, okay? So just keep this in mind. Try to get what James is putting down for us. And so our speech should be as if it flows from a good spring. We don't need to have a bad spring as a mouth in our words, right? So if the heart, the mind, that's where it should flow from. So when you have a mouth, and that's verse 10, the same mouth, when you have a mouth that is giving out blessings and cursings, so let's just say for good and bad, then something isn't right. That's what he's saying. It shouldn't be that way. Something ain't right because the spring don't do that. And he's the inspired writer who's making the connection, who's making the comparison here. So James, we're going to say, James, you know what you're talking about. It's not an apple to oranges kind of thing. No, James, you missed a point. No. And so something ain't right when you've got a mouth, which means a heart, a mind that is spitting out blessings and cursing. Something ain't right. And what that can only mean is that something's wrong with the blessings. Does that make sense? Something's wrong with the blessings. Something's wrong with the good that's coming out of the mouth. If you've got a mouth that's spitting bad and good, when we say, okay, well, at least it's half good, right? That can only mean something is wrong with the good. Now, why do you think I'm saying that?
Because you're trying to make a point.
I am trying to make a point. You cut me.
You can't be both ways. bad overrides the good every time.
Okay, you're right. You can't be both at the same time. But the bad overrides the good. But do you think that the good can override the bad?
Yes, it's good practice.
You think so?
It's taught there, yes.
Okay, well, let's say there's no change. So there's no change. Talk better would mean I'm gonna stop saying the bad things. No, there's no change. So I've got a mouth that's just spitting bad and good. We're all in agreement that the good can override the bad can override the good. But can it go vice versa? Can the good override the bad? Can the good somehow purify? Can the blessings somehow purify the cursings? Remember, there's no change. They're still coming.
No. I say no.
Jim says no. Anybody agree?
Once you put salt in the water, it's salt water, it's not, it's hard to get that out.
Yeah.
Once it's been contaminated.
But it takes to get it out, it takes a purification to get it out. And you have to purify your heart to change. Now, she's so true on that.
Yeah. Now so you're talking about change. I'm saying that the cursing is still coming. There's no change.
Without what good you say, there's no good.
Then the good, okay, so I would,
If you continue to curse and do that, I mean, things aren't gonna be good, even though you're still, doing good, but cursing, you're still doing wrong.
yeah. That's right. Marshall, you had something?
That's what I say, you can preach a sermon that's 90% scriptural, but then you have 10% that's not. I mean,
Amen.
it's.
Taints the whole thing, doesn't it?
Little leaven leavens the whole lump.
Little leaven's a whole lump. Okay, so Jim's right. You're right, Jim, because the bad can corrupt the good. The cursings can corrupt the blessings, but it can't go vice versa. The good can't purify the bad. And it makes, if I've got both coming out of my mouth, all the good all the good that's coming out is just nothing but, it's hypocritical, isn't it? That's all it is. And if I'm fooling somebody with it, it won't be long before they're not fooled any longer, right? George W. Bush, fool me once, can't fool me again, fool me twice, can't get fooled again. All right, so the blessings can't purify the cursings. The cursings, the bad that's coming out of someone's mouth is of such a nature that the good just loses its character. It loses whatever you want to call it to, grace. It loses whatever goodness that's attached to those words. And so while a person can try to do both, and they can try to live that way, and usually it's in front of different groups of people, and that's usually when this happens. And let's just use the church building because that's the most obvious one. Everybody comes to church, everybody behaves, everybody says the right thing. They don't let the thing slip out of their mouth at all. But in somebody else, in their home, where they're more comfortable, out it comes. When you're around your group of friends or whatever, you're at work, boom, out comes. Because now you're talking like everybody else. It's like whenever group we're around, we'll just talk like them. But that's a big problem.
That's kind of like someone said Sunday, influence. Influence the people around you.
Oh, yeah.
So we have people who talk decent around you all the time, and you're not going to talk like that. But now, if you're around people who talk like that, of course, it's easy to come
Yeah. It's going to be so hard to change. Yeah.
So we have to practice. We have to work on. I had to work on it.
Yeah. Well, imagine, a lot of us, you're not alone with that. So a person can try to do both, have blessing and cursings coming out of the mouth. James said, things ought not to be like that, because the cursing is revealing the true character of the person, the true heart of the person. Yes, sir.
I know that we're still in the same book, but kind of getting right back to James 1 where he's talking about being hostile at the sea,
Yeah.
You either are or you aren't.
Yeah.
Wishy-washy asking for it.
Yeah. That's very wishy-washy. Trying to have I've called it the best of both the worlds. You're trying to please everybody, that kind of thing, and trying to straddle the fence of Christianity, which is no such thing. Now, the next example, somebody else? Okay. The next example he gives is a little bit different. Now he's teaching the same thing, it's just he does it kind of like, approaches it from another direction, another angle. What does he say? Can a fig tree, my brother, bear olives, or a grapevine bear figs? Now the obvious answer is what? No. Okay, so he uses these trees, grapevine or olive tree, grapevine, to teach that. Here's what he's teaching: every plant or every tree, every vine, whatever, gives the proper fruit that it should. That's what he's getting. You're not gonna go up to a fig tree and get an olive. You're not going to go up to an olive tree and get a fig or a grapevine and get something else, right? A thing, whatever that thing is, produces after its own kind, right? That's law. That's the law. That's a law of nature, and that goes all the way back to Genesis 1 and verse 11. Where God created things, he created things to do that, to produce after their own kind. And when the thing does that, when the olive tree gives the olives and the fig tree gives the figs, then, and every kind produces after its own kind, that is an example of being in harmony with God's will for that thing. Does that make sense? It's perfectly harmonized. It's exactly the way God wanted it to happen, and it's doing that thing, okay? Matthew 12. Jesus is kind of preaching the same thing. Remember, I think James is borrowing a lot from Jesus. Matthew 12:34. He says, a good man, out of the good treasure of his heart, brings forth good things. Okay, well, yeah, makes sense, Jesus. That's right, because that's who he is, and that's the kind of tree he is. And so he's going to bear good fruit from a good tree. And then he says, an evil man, out of the evil treasure, brings forth what? Evil things. It's kind of like he's saying that's like the law of nature, so to speak. But the problem is, if it's evil, then it's out of harmony with God's will, and that's where we get that's a big problem, right? Because don't we want to live and speak and act and present ourselves to the world in such a way where we're in harmony with God's will? Yes. Okay. Yeah. So it's not a good way to be living if we're out of harmony with God's will. Everybody with me so far? You see the point that he's making? See how he's driving it home? Okay.
All these things that he uses, fresh water and salt water, out in the desert, I'm sure they have salt water springs and fresh water springs. I know what fish was. So he was explaining to them things that they knew at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Around here, we have no salt water, but we have muddy springs.
Yeah.
Salt springs.
Yeah, if I knew that, someone could come up here and probably bust out this great Mountain City parable that is teaching the same thing and make total sense, right? Yeah.
That's all I'm saying, he took it back and presented it to them the way they would understand it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. So you get the point, if you're struggling, with your words, then get what he's saying here. I'm saying, get it. Get what he's saying. So verse 13 says, who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by good conduct that his works are done in the meekness of wisdom. Now, when he asks a question like this, maybe, and he says, and he's talking like, so I've said this thing about the tongue. I've talked about teachers in verse 1. And so who among you is calling themselves wise and understanding? Who's saying, oh, James ain't talking about me? I think he might be anticipating someone in the churches that he's writing to saying, oh, yeah, James, you nailed it, buddy. But don't worry, James. Don't worry, congregation. They would get up and they would read the letter and, okay, this is from James, and here's what he has to say. And someone who might be teaching would be getting up and saying, okay, well, that's not me. No, amen, Brother James. But I'm the good teacher, and I've got the understanding, not talking about me. And so James is saying, congregation, if somebody is saying who is wise, if anyone's saying who's wise and understanding among you, then here's how it can be known if they really are, if they're genuine or not. And he says, what's the test? Let him show by good conduct. And now he's going back again to behavior. How you behave, how you conduct yourself not in your private home, but all by yourself, but among other people.
So, King James calls it conversation, I would use that one.
Yeah, conduct, yeah, conversation
Yeah, it's a
is, pretty sure, that came up the other day with somebody. When the King James was written, conversation obviously had carried some different meanings.
But it's still, I can understand what I'm saying, I just.
Yeah. Obviously, the word conversation, as we use it, fits pretty well with the talking within the context, right? I think but it means conduct. It means your behavior. And you can see that in other places, like in a whole nother way it's used in Philippians 3 and verse 20. It says, the King James says our conversation is in heaven. Well, he's not talking about your words there. He's talking about in the New King James it says citizenship.
Yeah, behavior, manner, conduct, and manner of life. That's why,
Yeah.
for instance, I didn't see that part.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, so, and isn't it true, like teacher or not, by the words somebody speaks, you can kind of tell the amount of, the measure of wisdom that they have. Isn't that true? And sometimes it takes a little while, just let them talk a little bit, but then sometimes it's right off the bat, like, yeah, you can tell they either know what they're talking about, and wow, that's a pretty wise fellow or a pretty wise lady there. Or you can tell that they got some, there's something missing. There's like a gear missing or something. And the same goes with our actions, isn't that right? You tell by the way someone acts, and this is what James is getting at. Now, we usually don't say this. We usually don't think about this way. It's all about words because the words come from our brains. And with our brains, we think, and that's where our wisdom sits up here, right? All that's true, but it's when we act. Oh, we're just acting on everything that's up here anyways, right? And so James is getting at behavior. When we act, you can tell just about how much wisdom we have or what kind of wisdom that we have, quote unquote wisdom. And this is what he's about. This is what he's about to get into. Any questions? Okay, so verse 14 says, but if you have bitter envy and self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast and lie against the truth. So this good conduct and the meekness of wisdom in verse 13 is being put up against, contrasted with the bitter envy and the self-seeking in verse 14. King James says strife, self-seeking, strife. Do you think that the example of a godly life that somebody gives to the world, that gives to other people, do you think that the example that they live is a far better indicator of the things they say, or is it kind of the same? Because some people can say some very, very smart things.
What you act is what you are.
Okay. Well, that's true. Or do you think it's a better indicator? Which one do you think is a better indicator of wisdom? The way we behave or the way we talk?
The way you conduct yourself.
I've always heard action speaks louder than words.
Okay, yeah. Action speaks louder than words. Yeah. So let's say you got a man or a woman, and they are always arguing for the truth. And they are like book, chapter, verse, boom, 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 and they are just nailing it down. They're shutting down naysayers. They're stopping false teachers in their tracks and this and that. I mean, they just really know how to put it on somebody with the truth. And the things that they're saying is true. But the way they're doing it, they're going to the tent meetings. And they're confronting the preachers at the tent meetings, you know. And they're passing out their material at the tent meetings, and they're getting into but probably not. They're not probably doing that, saying the truth. maybe not so much glorifying God as they could be. And then you got a guy over here who's just very calmly, very wisely, not that he doesn't ever argue or have a discussion, not that he ever stands up for truth, but that he's always just living and speaking in a godly way, just no matter what. I mean, who do you think is going to win more souls to Christ? They're both right. They're both doing the same. They're preaching, let's say, the same thing. Who do you think is going to win more souls? Yeah, y'all know. Philippians 1 talks about while Paul was in prison, he got word there were some people preaching Jesus Christ from good motives, and then there were also people preaching Jesus Christ from envy and strife, which is was translated self-seeking here in the New King James. Philippians 1, let's say, maybe 11 through 13. Or go all the way through 16, actually. Let's say 15 through 17. So you had some people, but they were preaching the truth. They're just doing it with the wrong motives. And so we know that can happen. And you got to know that the guy who's just all about it and he's in your face kind of thing, he's preaching the truth, probably not going to be as effective as the guy who is a little more open, a little more welcoming to people who might disagree with him. And of course, that all has to do with words and the way we present ourselves and act towards one another. Now, I think in another context, other than outside of James here, in another context, I think there could be something said about showing one's wisdom and their knowledge with big words, scholarly terms, and how well they debate people, right? I think in another context that wisdom can be shown there. In Titus chapter 1 and verse 11, Paul's saying that there's subordinate idle talkers and deceivers, and they need their mouths stopped. You got to stop their mouths. Their mouths need to be shut. And so I think there's a place for that. But what James is not talking about that. James is simply teaching here that behavior trumps. Behavior trumps all is above all else. And the reason why he's honing in on the behavior, it should make we think about why is he doing this? Is because this is what these Christians needed to hear. This is what they needed. And so he writes appropriately about it, right? Makes sense to me. Any comments or questions? All right, 15 and 16, he says, this wisdom does not descend from above. Now, this is the bitter envy, self-seeking from 14. This is bad wisdom. Does not descend from above, but is earthly, sensual, the New King James says, and demonic. For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there. Well, that's bad. That sounds awful. So if you have a NIV version of the Bible, which then you'll see the translators put quotation marks around the word wisdom in verse 15. And obviously that's not in the original, but they are presenting the idea, and I think it does help us see how James is maybe using this kind of wisdom, where it's like, this is not really wisdom. This is like a show of wisdom, or let's say it's something that has a semblance of wisdom, but it's not really. And that's why if you have an NIV and maybe some other Bible translations do it, they'll put quotes around it. When I'm up here doing it all the time, I'm always like, bump, 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 busting out the air quotes. Wisdom, you know what I'm talking about, right? And that's kind of the idea here. It's like those who are claiming this and they're calling it wisdom, they really have a false representation of the real thing. And what's that? What good is that going to do you? Nothing. I can do that to you. I can all day. I will be louder. Okay, so look what he says. He says it's not from above, It does not descend from above. It's not godly wisdom. This is not heavenly wisdom. And he says, but it's earthly. So he's knocking it down one. Earthly would be opposite of heaven. It's completely opposite of heaven. A kind of wisdom, someone who practices this kind of wisdom would set their sights on earthly things and material things, and they're more materialistic, more humanistic kind of thing. And then he says it's sensual, or I don't know if anybody has another word, but
Pure, peaceful, gentle.
natural is another word that you will see there. Physical, or I like the way the ESV puts it is unspiritual. It's unspiritual. But natural might be a good, maybe the better word for it. 1 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 14, it says that the natural man, the sensual man, the physical man, doesn't, the one who focuses on the physical things, does not receive the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness to him. And that's the idea. I think that's the idea. That's the natural man. The man who's not spiritual. Not like the spiritual man. He receives the things of the Spirit of God because he's influenced by godly things. And of course, 1 Corinthians 2 is talking about apostles and inspiration and all of that. But maybe a good idea, a good word for it is animal-like. It's not descend from above. It is earthly. It is animal-like. Like when you do this, you practice this, you know better than the animals that are roaming around. And then he goes even further down. I want you to notice, it's like we're climbing down a ladder. This is what he's saying. And I think the point is to the reader to let them know that this wisdom is as far away from God as possible. He's not heavenly, it's earthly, it's sensual, and then as far away as you can get from God, he says it's demonic. And I think maybe that's the imagery that he's trying to get there. This is not the thing that you want to have something to do with. Whatever, and I don't have much to say about it being demonic. This is just the way, it's got to be something similar to where he says the tongue is set on fire by hell in verse number 6. Got to be similar to that. So whatever Satan or devils or demons, whatever they would do to, whatever means they would employ to reach some kind of end, reach some kind of goal, then this kind of wisdom would be, this would be a part of it. And he's saying how sad and how unfortunate that people, even Christians, can display the same kind of wisdom, quote unquote. And that's awful. That's awful to run around with the name Christian. And this is the kind of wisdom you're showing the world? You kidding me? And to think that everything's going to be all peachy clean, that everything's going to be fine come Judgment Day if no repentance is taking place. And so all of that, verse 16, that's why we have these words: envy, self-seeking, confusion, every evil thing. More sin is just sure to follow. Nothing good coming out of this. Every evil thing. Then he gets to 17 and 18 and he says, but the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. Now the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. So this kind of wisdom, obviously seen in the actions of a person. You can read every single one of those and see how that can translate to some kind of action out of somebody. And so when one is practicing these things, not a one-time off when you're having just a good day and you want to do something nice for somebody, you're just like, you know what, I'm going to be nice today. When someone practices these things, it can be said that that person has this kind of wisdom, the wisdom that is from above. And the idea is to get us to look up in a way to God. And all this goes back to that good conduct in verse 13. He's trying to get them to see and understand how they should be living. Good conduct, Good conduct, our behavior. It's all about our behavior. It says everything to the world. Everything, it says everything to the world. So, any comments? Does this list sound familiar at all? Does it like remind you of anything else you've read in the New Testament? It's one of those lists, right? Like you've read there's a lot of lists in the New Testament.
Spirit, fruits of the spirit.
Okay, so doesn't that remind us of the fruit of the Spirit? And where's that found at? What book? Galatians, what chapter? 5. Galatians 5. So yeah, this kind of reminds us of the fruit of the Spirit a little bit, don't it? Can you think of anything else? Does it remind you any bit at all about the Beatitudes maybe? Beatitudes in Matthew chapter what? Where are the Beatitudes at? Matthew 5. Matthew 5. What about, now, they're not called this in the scriptures, but 2 Peter 1, what we call the Christian graces sometimes, or the Christian virtues, where he says, add to your faith virtue, to virtue knowledge. Let me find it. Virtue, knowledge, self-control, perseverance, godliness, brotherly kindness, love. Can I remind you of that? Anything else? Remind you of that? Maybe you were thinking, you just didn't know where it was. Maybe you were thinking Philippians 4 and verse 8, where he says, finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, pure, lovely, good report, virtuous, praiseworthy. He says, think on these things or meditate on these things. So what we call those, I call them the Christian meditations, Philippians 4:8. So very similar list, right? Kind of makes me think that all these Bible writers were they've got one central location where they're getting all of their information from, perhaps. That's just a wild guess. But notice in James 3:18 or 17, what comes first? Huh? No, what comes first in the list of the 8?
Purity.
Wisdom is purity. Purity. First pure, then it's all of these things. No purity, no nothing. None of these things are going to follow if purity is not there. The word pure that's translated pure, the Greek word translated pure, is got the same root word as the word holy. And we talked about holy some time ago. Holy is the same word we get saint from, and that's what all Christians are supposed to be holy. We're called to be saints, called to be holy. Pure is a little different than, we said holy would be set apart, right? Set apart for a very specific purpose. Pure has the idea of being chaste and modest and innocent and blameless, right? Without any sinful practice whatsoever. I'm not saying without sin, because we can't be that. I'm saying without any sinful practice, and I'm absolutely convinced we can be without that. Without any sinful practice whatsoever. Morally pure. That's the idea here. Morally pure. We got to have pure morals. We got to have a very true moral compass. Does that make sense? Moral compass. Yes, sir.
How do you get that moral compass?
How do you get the moral compass?
How do you get that moral compass?
My answer is always going to be E right here.
That's what I look.
I don't know how else you get it. I think there's some other helps you can use to get it, mainly surrounding yourself with other people. A lot of that, what I was answering all those questions Sunday morning. Like I'll say all those questions I can just say and answer. It's right here. Read the book. Read the Bible. Read the Bible. Read the New Testament. Read about God. Learn about who God is. Learn about Jesus Christ.
Study it.
Yeah, study it. Yeah, learn, study. Think about it. Pray about it.
Eat it.
Yeah, eat it. You got to eat the book,
Digest it.
like John was told in Revelation.
Yeah.
Eat the book. Yeah, you gotta eat it. Take it all in. Nom, 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 nom. Yes, sir.
To some degree, I mean, we know what good and bad is just by being made in his image. You know, not.
Yeah. I think there is
Not
a,
saying you can't
yeah.
find the moral compass, but, you know.
no, there is something that God gives us, yeah.
Yeah, we have that kind of naturally ingrained in us, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
If you took you out of the cookie jar, you know you're gonna get in trouble for it because you're told not to steal the cookie.
Mhm.
You know it was bad.
Yeah, I think there's something, I think Romans 2 would speak to that. Yep. So morally pure, let me run through the rest of these here. Now, the King James says the next, it's easy. No, I've got willing to yield. What's the King James say? Or gentle, pure, then
Peaceable.
what's the peaceable, and then what's the
Gentle.
gentle, and then what?
Easy to-
Reasonable.
easy to be entreated.
Easy to be entreated.
Reasonable.
Reasonable. Yeah. And this wisdom is reasonable. Some would say that the idea behind it is ready to forgive. That's the idea there.
Impartial.
Willing to yield, impartial, ready to forgive. You don't think anybody struggles with that, do you? Now, so you take that along with peaceable and gentle, these first four, pure, peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, kind of ready to forgive, reasonable. And now you've got, and we wouldn't know this if we didn't have other writings, but there's other writings out there that the Jews have a lot of writing. And he's echoing a Jewish saying that a pious man, the Jews say, that they would say a pious man, when you find a pious man, you're going to find a person that's hard to provoke and easily pacified. And boy, do we need more of those people in the world. Hard to provoke and easily pacified. And the rest, and that's the idea of the peacemaker. Verse 18, that ought to remind you of, by those who make peace, the peacemakers, blessed are the peacemakers, right? Matthew 5. For they shall be called the sons of God. Peacemaker. And don't we need more peacemakers in the world? We could just start, 1, in our own homes, 2, in the church, and hopefully that will spread to the world. We need more peacemakers. Great day. But the rest of these, without these good fruits, full of mercy, without partiality, no hypocrisy, all of those we can easily see and apply to a pure, a morally sound, godly lifestyle. And these things have everything to do, one more time before we go, it's about our behavior towards other people. It's about our behavior. We are reflecting something. We're supposed to be reflecting Christ in our behavior. Okay. Great work, everybody. We will do the questions next time we meet. So be prepared. Thank you.